Hi, welcome. I'm Heidi Levy. I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncturist and co-owner of Bleecker Street Wellness, a large healers collective here in Manhattan treating all kinds of different patients. So this is a short video on Fu Moxibustion. It's a classic type of herbal therapy that we do in order to help people who have allergies, bronchitis, asthma, any sort of upper respiratory issues. If you found this video, you're most likely one of three types of people. You're either a Chinese medicine practitioner who's heard about this, maybe come across a little bit of research and you're kind of curious. You're a student of acupuncture who this might have been touched about in class, but you didn't really do a deep dive. Or you're a patient who you're just trying to kind of figure out the who, what, when, where, why, how of this therapy. So if you're a Chinese medicine practitioner, I'm actually going to suggest two things. Number one, go get Lorraine Wilcox's book on Moxibustion. It's a seminal book that every single acupuncturist or practitioner should have in their library, where she really does do a deep dive of this. Other thing you can do is come on over to eLotus and get some of your CEUs, where I'll be talking about everything from point structures, herbal structures, how to do the herbs, where to find the herbs, sourcing, and even clinical pearls that we've learned along the way over the last 10 years. If you're a student or you're a patient, let's get a little bit into it. When most people hear the word Moxibustion, what they think about is they think about something called mugwort floss, which is an antique type of heat therapy that we burn over points. If you've received this type of therapy in the past, what you've probably had is either like a long cigar that we light on fire and wave around like we're Gandalf or something, or we'll often like roll it up, burn it directly on the points. Usually Moxibustion has this kind of context of heat, but directly fire. If we broaden the discussion and we broaden the definition beyond fire, Moxibustion can actually include anything that causes a blister. So we can start to include warm, acrid, hot herbs that we apply as a paste to different types of points in order to get a therapeutic effect. That type of herbal Moxibustion is something known as heavenly Moxibustion or celestial Moxibustion. It's very common in China, and it's one of these things where it actually folds into the concepts of plasters, anything that's stuck on the skin. With this type of therapy, what you need to know is the type of herbs we use. One example could be garlic, one example could be ginger. Whatever we do, we're actually looking to cause an abrasion or a blister on the skin that's going to continue a long-lasting effect that would go beyond the timing of just a simple acupuncture treatment and the needles. The next question is, when do we do this? This type of therapy is based on the Taoist calendar, which is really like the Chinese antique farmer's almanac. In the summer, we have something called gung days, which are yang metal days. So these are days that are calculated after the summer solstice to be 3 of the hottest days of the year, the most yang days of the year. And it's really kind of fascinating. With the time that we've been doing this, I feel like every time we've gone to do Fu Moxibustion, everybody's just like sweating, and the subways in New York are the absolute worst. So the idea is that when we use the calendar, and it goes beyond just local, but astrological, where we are in the universe, is that we're using the universe and the planet, that yang, that heat, and we're taking it and applying it onto the skin, and we're causing a blister so that those herbs can be absorbed through the skin into the flesh, and that the flesh and the earth and the body can actually hold on to that yang, hold on to that heat to sustain us through the winter. And because there's this correspondence with skin and the lungs, these type of herbs, the warm, hot, acrid herbs, are herbs that are designed to really work on the immune system, to open up the lungs, and so therefore it treats things from bronchitis, allergies. I've had patients who actually complained of cold hands and feet through the winter that totally disappeared. I've had patients come back, and two patients who came back and said that their cramps were resolved with this, which is very unusual. But the majority of patients say when they do this, it's the first winter that they've never gotten sick. Now, when you have patients come in or you're doing this for yourself, the complete therapy is in 3 sessions, and you do need to come consecutively 3 times for it to work, because every time you come in, You'll be using the same herbs, but it's a different point structure that's happening. And those 10 days kind of correspond with the time it takes to heal from the blisters or the irritation that happen. That's why we don't redo points every single time you come in. Another question that commonly asks is, can you do this therapy in winter? Can you do this therapy in April? Can you do this therapy when you're not against the Taoist calendar? The answer to that is yes. The caveat, though, is the studies that have been done in China actually show that when we do them in the dog days of summer, the therapy happens to work better. The next question is, who should do this? Well, really, people who have any sort of upper respiratory issues that really tend to get exacerbated in winter. This is people who are often on inhalers, nebulizers in fall, winter, people who get sick at the change of seasons, anyone with sort of bronchitis, people who get the flu every year, regardless of whether they're getting vaccines or other prophylactic measures, who really shouldn't do this. We always recommend that pregnant women do this with caution. I personally don't do this on pregnant women here in the office, just like to be conservative around that. If you have the raging flu or a raging cold in summer, or you have something where you have a temperature, don't do this. Skip that day, go to the next day. We also recommend that children can do this. I don't do it on anyone under the age of 2, but between the age of 2 and 6, you can keep the Sanfu on for about 20 minutes. We usually keep them in the office so that we have the supervision of being able to take it off. Kids from about 6 to prepubescence in there, we generally recommend that they can do the Sanfu for up to about 2 hours, but even for adults, we don't recommend that you do this more than 6 hours at a time. With all this buildup, what exactly is Sanfu? So, what Sanfu is it's formulas that we grind into a fine powder and that we mix with ginger juice. Ginger juice is the best, but we mix with ginger juice into fine, small, round balls that are about the consistency of Play-Doh. A lot of the herbs that we use as well tend to be pretty caustic. So they're not herbs that we would ever take internally, but they're fine to actually put externally on the skin. And then in whatever formula we're using, there's always some sort of hot, acrid herb that's going to cause a chemical reaction or a chemical blister. You've probably seen this kind of thing that can happen with garlic, it can happen with mustard seed, but it's actually an important part of the therapy because it does two things. One, it irritates the skin enough for the herb to actually be transdermally absorbed at that point. Two, because these herbs are so caustic, they're actually beneficial as long as they're not ingested. So this is another way to bypass the digestive system, and it's a much gentler way of kind of getting them into you. We put these small balls, and you never want them to be much bigger than the size of an eraser head, and we put them on the points and we adhese them with some sort of tape or something, and then we send that patient off on their merry way. Next question I want to answer is what to expect from this. Now, it just really depends on, how strong the herbs you're using, how strong the ginger is that you're using to mix the herbs with, and the length of application that you've allowed this to stick to your body. Now, this is not one of those things where if a little is good, a lot must be better. You really don't want to go beyond 6 hours with this. But what to expect is most people, when the herbs are put on, they say, okay, that's interesting. And then it'll go from 0 to 60 like that, where it suddenly gets super, 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 super hot because it's starting to cause a chemical burn. Now, some people, this might happen within the first 20 minutes. Some people, this might take about 5 hours to happen. Just depending on your skin type, depending on your histamine levels, depending on your immune system, what might happen, it might be anywhere from just slight irritation all the way to a giant blister. Now, if it's a giant blister, you're going to want to treat that blister the same way that you would treat any blister. The caveat to this is, though, that we're using warm, hot, acrid herbs that we want to be able to absorb that heat. If you're putting some sort of Neosporin or Vaseline, you just want to make sure that there's no cooling elements to that. And then you're going to keep the blister covered, clean. You know what to do. You're adults. You'll figure it out. The thing to this, though, is when people have had some reactions that have been reported by patients are things like they suddenly felt like they had the flu. They suddenly felt like they got sick out of nowhere. Patients have also reported while having the Sanfu on them such things as headaches, a little bit of lightheadedness, and I've had some patients actually sweat through their shirts within the first hour of this. It just really depends patient to patient, and there's no guarantee that that same reaction is going to happen the second, third time that you do it, and there's no guarantee that it's going to happen the following year if you decide to do this year on year. So I've had patients where in the first year they wind up with really big blisters, everything kind of dies down, skin heals, there might be a little bit of mark, and then we do the exact same formula the next year, Sanfu dog days next year, and nothing happens. It's actually kind of anticlimactic because their body's just kind of adjusting to it. Other things to expect is that, again, just depending on the type of skin you have, the marks might last a day, the marks might last a couple years, in which case you can do any sort of scar therapy you want to. I like lavender oil, St. John's wort, that works the best, but anything that you get in the pharmacy too is fine. Another question that we get is, where do we stick these little herbal balls? Where do we apply them? Now, when we do it here at Bleecker Street Wellness, and as I've done it over the 10 years, I stick to the protocols that are found in Lorraine Wilcox's seminal book that I've mentioned before. She has 2 point structures, and both point structures work gloriously. They're really easy to get to because they're all on the back, right next to the spine. That being said, I've had practitioners who, they actually come here to have us do it because they know that we're one of the few people who do it, who, when they've had it done in China, they'll often place the little balls and stick them on places such as the chest, upper chest, you can stick it on the legs. It just really depends on your level of experience as a practitioner, where you're comfortable sticking these things, and your patient's comfort level. Now, I have found that when we do apply it along the center line on the chest, that people with asthma and bronchitis get a much bigger bang for their buck with it. I've also found, though, that people who tend to get like the flu, regular colds, that kind of thing, when we stick to the back shoe, the urinary bladder point structure on the back, that they're the ones who actually get a real kind of like immune boost throughout that year. All right, so if you're here in New York, you can obviously come into Bleecker Street Wellness. Check out my website. We do this through the 3 days in summer every single year. It's growing bigger, 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 bigger. I'm really hoping that this is going to take off. We've seen it take off in Manhattan. So I would suggest reaching out to your local acupuncturist or reaching out to your local Chinese medicine school to see if this is something that they can offer. If you have bigger questions beyond that, feel free to email me, and we hope to see you here soon.